Welcome to Business Mentorship, Keepin It Real, and a new season featuring panel guests who have shared their business stories in our guest blog, discussing topics trending in business. The world of work has changed, and we're finding that we're having to navigate a hybrid environment that speaks to a new definition of wealth and well-being. Our panel guests have a number of years with combined experience working with clients to support growth, both personally and professionally. And they join us today to share their thoughts on the changes we're seeing to a new definition of wealth and well-being. We focus on freedom to create lifestyle choices that support our time, energy, and attitude towards work. And I'd like to introduce you to our panel guests. We'll start with Maura Joy Lustig, who's a coach in health and wellness from Peterborough, Ontario. We have Sharon Gill, who's a leadership coach and philanthropist from Charlotte, North Carolina. We have Precious Fuller, a diversity and inclusion specialist from Atlanta, Georgia, and Robinson Smith, who's an author and speaker of the Smith Maneuver from Victoria, BC. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You know, it's so wonderful to have all of you joining us in a panel discussion because none of you have met each other than perhaps reading your stories and maybe seeing your individual interviews. So I'm really thrilled that we can get together and have a chance to sort of share some thoughts and opinions on what we're experiencing with clients and sort of in our own social networks. So, Maura, I thought we'd start with you because healthy lifestyle choices is always a focus at this time of year, especially in January. So, have you noticed in recent months a shift in attitudes towards looking and feeling better?
To a certain extent, Trish, I would agree that people are more aware of how they show up and about how they want to be able to really step more fully into maybe building their businesses in different ways or connecting more with family. And one of the things that I teach is, the first piece is self-awareness. And then from there, we can go into self-care because you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. And looking and feeling good means taking care of you first so that you can then pour into others. And then ultimately self-mastery. So we've got 3 steps to that. But yes, I agree that right now people are looking at ways, especially, you notice at the beginning of the year, there are different turning points in the year where people are triggered, whether it's the beginning of September, the beginning of January. And unfortunately, I'll speak more about this as we go further. It would be that the mistake people make is waiting until when to get started on something that's important to them instead of realizing that it's the small steps and all we ever have is now. So what if every day was New Year's Day?
You know, that's so true because I think that we find that, this new dynamic that we're all dealing with, and, whether you're selling to a product or service to a client or in your own social network, this hybrid environment model is really creating a new sense of awareness for sure. And I love the fact that you've sort of made the connection between self care and looking after ourselves first, because I think we can all agree that there are certain stages and ages in life when you kind of go to the bottom of the list, right? Sharon, do you want to expand on that whole thought process? And even in when we're caregivers as women, we find that there's even times when we have to put our business to the back burner and put our focus on health and wellness, right?
Yeah, that's right. And as I was listening to Mara and she was saying, people trying to decide when. I think COVID has taught us one thing. That was so unexpected. It changed the dynamics of how we do work, how we look at self-care, how we look at mental health. And I love what you said about self-awareness because that's something I try to teach, my clients, like, hey, be aware of your emotions, be aware of what's going on with you, and then have some intelligence about what's going on with other people. And hybrid, the interesting thing for me, right, is that hybrid is still an option. People's first choice is still virtual. This morning, I was sitting here, I was doing some quiet time, and my granddaughter, who is 7, she said, "Man, I'd like to work from home." She's 7. So I said, "What do you mean work from home?" She said, "Yeah, I want to stay home and then just hang out with you and be here." And it's just, I'm thinking, you're 7. So that means that next generation, 2 or 3 down, the whole concept of work and where we work and how we do work is so different. It's about comfort. She
Yes.
wants to stay home so she
Yeah.
can hang with her grandmother because that gives her comfort. And
Yes.
so this is the kind of trends that I'm seeing, and it shows too. Even when I work with teams, If that employer is not aware, emotionally aware of where they're at, they're gone. And we've all
So
heard
true.
about the great resignation, the great reset, the great, the quiet quitting. Well, it's all about that whole self-care and that whole emotional management. And
Right.
so, yeah, this is where we are as a world right now.
Yeah,
It's
for
about
sure.
it's about me first. It really has become about me first.
Now, Maura, one of the things that we all seem to do in January, and I don't know why it's January. I know you mentioned September. For some people, it's when the kids go back to school. For other people, it may be holidays that trigger, this whole awareness piece. But generally speaking, in January, we're all sitting down and writing, we'll call them New Year's resolutions, for lack of a better phrase. But tell us a little bit about what you're finding in terms of that whole piece about the realignment of our goals and where we're going with that.
Well, one of the things that I see over and over is because I go to the gym every day. I work out every day, whether I'm at the gym or I'm power walking on the trails or in the summer out on an e-bike with my husband. But what I see in January or September or certain punctuation points in the year, we all know this. Suddenly the gym is so full you can't even get into the parking lot.
Right.
And
Right.
anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks later, no problem, they're gone because
That's
people
true.
will join with the best of intentions. And then what happens is they walk in the door, they're in an unfamiliar environment. And I'm just using exercise as an example. This applies
Sure.
to all areas of our life where we decide
Yeah.
that, we're finally ready to do something that's important to us, that involves focus, time, commitment, and sacrifice. Okay. And you think about your career, you think about, different things you want to master in life. But your health is the focus right now. So people show up at the gym, they're uncomfortable, they're embarrassed because they're looking at the people who go all the time and they're
Mhm.
comparing themselves. And we all know comparison is the thief of joy. And,
I
and,
love that.
and then they're lifting a weight or they're doing something and they're doing it awkwardly and self-consciously and it's hurting. And they're thinking, I don't know if I really want to do this. And so there are things that we need to know in advance that if we're going to do something that's brand new, whether it's quitting smoking or whether it's saying yes to getting it fit, that you have to accompany that thought with a clear plan. And that involves support, whether it's a coach, a mentor, buddies,
Hmm.
accountability partners, people that will hold you capable, but not push your buttons and make you feel self-conscious. There's a
Right.
difference, right?
Yeah, very
And so
true.
there's that and developing the routine because you have to trust the process. You have to fall in love with the journey, not the
Mhm.
destination. And then when
Yeah,
you know that, well, then every day it's just one more step
a
in
little
your
different.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Robinson, why don't you give us a male perspective on this whole idea about making healthy lifestyle choices? Because, we tend to always gravitate towards the female perspective, to be quite honest. And I'm sure that, men sometimes feel that they're being left out because it's just as important for you guys to be healthy and enjoy your wealth journey as it is for women. So give us a little bit of a perspective from a man's perspective. Is the health and wellness journey as important to you at whatever stage you are in your career?
Um, Personally, honestly, no. It's it's not. I mean, where I'm at in my life, I was an investment advisor for a dozen years with a successful practice here in Victoria. And in the middle of 2018, I sold my advisory to write a book uh, explaining a financial strategy to get out to everybody because it's not easy out there. So I started my new business, started working from home, middle of 2018. Uh, and COVID came, you know, late 2019, 2020, and I was looking forward to working from home after working in an office for a dozen years. And it was great at the beginning, but then I missed the work environment, being out there in public and with colleagues and all that. And there wasn't an opportunity because everything was shut down for me to go out, take some time off from my home office and go out and sit in a coffee shop, maybe do a bit of work there. So
Mhm.
the I the health and wellness part of it for me, when I think of what we're discussing today and health and wellness, it's more emotional or mental.
Oh,
Because I mean, I certainly wasn't the only one who said, "Oh, this is odd," and I'm missing connection. I'm missing freedom of movement, and uh, that's taken a bit of a toll. Um, Not a whole lot. Certainly, it's harmed a lot more others to a
Mhm.
greater extent than I
Mhm.
think myself. But that has certainly been something that, while I am focusing in my business on the financial side of things, my wife, as you know, Trish, just came out with a book, Making Friends with the Boogeyman.
Right.
She's focusing more on the spiritual, the mental, the emotional part of wellness.
Right.
So it's interesting between the two of us. I'm focusing on financial wellness, and she's focusing on the
Mental
more
and health.
ethereal aspect
Yeah.
of wellness.
Yeah.
But we're seeing both of us in our professional lives challenges for a lot of people out there on
Mhm.
the financial side and the emotional side. And certainly, I think um, there's a lot of work to be done
For
for
sure.
a lot of professionals with all these people out there who are suffering, not talking about it for a various number of reasons, and looking for help, whether it be with personal finances, whether it be emotionally or mentally. So it's a very, very interesting time. And my services, what I do, are certainly needed because it's not easy out there financially. But
Yeah. For sure.
especially my wife, Heidi. I think her book, "Making Friends with the Boogeyman," is very, very timely with all that's going on in the world, all the
For
the
sure.
instability that's affecting people emotionally and mentally and spiritually. So interesting times. Being able to adapt from a work environment to either a hybrid or a work at home has been challenging. People think, oh, this is going to be great. I get to work from the house. Well, now you have the dog trying to get into your home office. You've got kids,
Right.
you've got all of this
Yeah.
combined with the work pressures that you've always had,
Yeah.
with the addition of new work pressures of a different work environment. So
Sure.
I think these are interesting times, and everybody out there who focuses on improving people's lives, whether it be financially, emotionally, spiritually, I think are very much needed these days.
Well, thank you for that because I'm going to segue to Sharon because as a leadership coach, things like trust and flexibility come to mind, when we're talking about all of this new work environment. So, do you find that we've adapted to this hybrid model with folks dividing their time between the home and an office environment? Because I love that, Robinson has mentioned, do we need the human connection? And the human connection doesn't really work virtual all the time. So, what's your experience?
That is true. I mean, in my mind, I mean, I think a hybrid is the perfect solution, but I'm honestly seeing that people are looking for virtual jobs. So it's really weird. Even in the practice of law, for example, right, where lawyers are used to having their shop, where clients can come in. People are trying to build virtual law firms. And let me just say this, with the metaverse coming in is the virtual world. So although I would prefer a hybrid, and maybe many of us would prefer a hybrid, I think people are still, back to Mara's point, it's more about self, right? And yes, to Robinson's point, some people need that human connection, but they want to go get that on their terms.
Right.
And so that's what I'm seeing. And companies who aren't agile, that's what I saw in 2020. They really missed the opportunity. Um, when COVID happened, that's kind of when I got a lot of my work, and it was for companies who were trying to get ready to pivot and to switch. But there were so many companies who were behind on technology that they missed the mark. But those companies who did go that route, they have not gone back to the office. No, they have not gone back. All my clients remained virtual. And so we love the idea of hybrid, but I'm just being honest. Virtual is still what people are seeking right now, virtual opportunities.
So, how does that change the leadership skills? I mean, we're all leaders in our own right, as entrepreneurs and people who are in our own businesses, whether we're leading teams or our individual teams, or whether we're just communicating, for instance, in this platform, our leadership skills have to change because virtually that's a whole different type of connection. So, is there a leadership skill that you're finding that the virtual world is now in need of that we should be considering as part of our own repertoire moving forward?
Great question. Emotional awareness.
Ah,
Knowing what your people need in this moment,
yeah.
being adaptable, being flexible, I mean, these are the big communication, communicating. Those are the things that I'm seeing that leaders having to step up, getting rid of the old mindsets of the way how we used to do things. I've seen leaders resist, get resentful because they're being required to adapt.
Right.
But then those leaders who are inflexible are losing people. And
Right.
so leaders have to begin to think, okay, I have to adapt and not feel like they're being cheated. How we do performance appraisal. No longer is it not, okay, if I'm early, punctual, what does punctuality look like now?
Ah, that's a good
All,
point.
all these rules have changed.
Right.
All
Right.
these rules have changed. Monitoring, all these stuff have changed.
Yeah,
And so
that's
as
true.
a leader, you have to be flexible, very open-minded. I mean, still, still have your goals and your bottom line results, but what does productivity looks like? And what is my work hours? Is
Right.
it when I want to do it or when you want me to do it?
Right.
And that
So,
I'll apologize for jumping in, but
oh,
that
that's
is a
okay.
challenge for I experienced that myself. I work from home now. I still have an office 20 minutes away with 2 employees, but I make it in maybe once a week
Hmm.
or less. And there's no popping your head in once or twice a day and say, hey, how's it going? Or let's go get a cup of coffee. And so there's a big gap there for myself, and I assume a lot of people.
Mhm.
I'm going to add to that too. It's about project
Yes.
versus exact output. Like it's not the hours. It's did the
Yes.
job get done, and you
Right.
get to
Yes.
do it on your time, your terms.
Right.
Yep. Maura is right with that. It's about projects. So
Right.
it's a big mindset shift. And what Robinson said about, hey, how do you connect still? Well, I find you have to be creative. So my clients, they're on Zoom and they have that connect time. They use Slack and they do quick scrum meetings. You can adapt, you can adjust. And this is exactly what I'm saying. If you don't have the mindset to use technology, then you're gonna be in problems. I know I have two kids, 28 and 30, just turned 30. They will not go back to an office.
Oh, really?
2 years now,
Wow.
they're working from home. They're like, if
Wow.
I have to go back to an office, I'll quit my job.
That's interesting. Now, Precious, you've just gone back into an office environment. So you sort of changed your dynamic. I'm really interested in hearing your point of view, especially on the fact that, you're now going into a regular location where you had freedom in a hybrid model before. So how are you finding the transition from going from perhaps more freedom in terms of time and flexibility now back into an office environment?
Yes, that is a great question as well. It has strengthened my character. Let's say that.
Oh,
When you are,
interesting.
yeah, and when you are home, things are more on your terms.
Right.
Everything is copacetic. Let's just
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
When you go into an environment that has already been established
Mhm.
by someone other than yourself, there are factors that you have to contend with, and it's nothing like strengthening your muscles other than resistance. So, it definitely is a different dynamic. It's one that I welcome at the time. It definitely does present its challenges, but that's what's developing my leadership skill in a new way.
Right.
Because it's all of connections are a part of things, but being able to build that, being in face and in person, it's nothing like that versus a Zoom, a screen.
Mhm.
Right.
The screen does something for those connections that are already established. We already
Mhm.
have our plan. We're focused. We're good. We're object driven. Let's say by the objective.
Sure.
But when you're in person, that emotional intelligence comes into play.
Yeah.
The awareness of yourself and others, and in this dynamic, and then you have the nerve to want to lead. To actually lead the atmosphere, the people in a direction. So it's a different set of dynamics for sure,
Right.
and it's one that can keep us when
Yeah.
let's say maybe with the hybrid model, when you are dealing with people in their element and environment versus just in your living room, in your personal home office, whatever you're doing, it's a different dynamic for sure, but it's one that has the ability to strengthen you in a new way and create some power in that setting with those you interact with in a new way as well. And it's not one-sided help.
Right.
They help you.
Right.
That's always it's a dual
Yeah.
role
2-way
engagement.
street.
Mhm.
Now, Robinson, you made a really good point, and that is, you are working in a hybrid model where you're working from home, and then you have team members that are in an office. And we know that you're in the business of helping folks maximize their income potentials so that they can create more freedom and flexibility in their life and in their workplace in general. Are you finding that post-COVID that the overall attitude for people discussing money has changed? Because there's lots of sayings around money provides us with the freedom to pursue the things that we want to do. And I mean, Sharon's already mentioned her, mature adult children are not going back
Nope.
to the office environment. So are you finding that that's creating new conversations around money and about individual and personal wealth?
Well, it's interesting. When I'm addressing the public and educating people about this particular financial strategy, the Smith Mover, it's more of a one-sided conversation. I'm doing a lot of webinars and presentations, but I speak a lot to financial professionals whom I'm training up to assist these people to implement the strategy. And the consensus I'm getting generally is that it's divided out there as regards people's attitude to their personal finances. When things get tough, when markets go down, when unemployment is rising, when there's uncertainty, increasing rates, inflation, all of this, people tend to either dive into it and say, I've got to do something. I've got to make a change, because we all know if you don't make a change, no change is going to happen. Some people realize that and they move forward and they say, how can I fix this? How can I make things better? And then, of course, there are people who just put their head deeper and deeper into the sand. So it's interesting. And, this changes. Times are good, times are bad. Um, you get all these different attitudes towards money and personal finances because money is very emotional. It's a very, very emotional thing. And I didn't always understand that. I was actually taught that and trained into that by my wife, who has very different opinions about certain things. But I'm getting a more holistic picture about the whole thing right now. But it's very interesting once you're aware to actually be able to observe consciously how people are reacting to certain situations. And there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and people are scared for their personal finances, for their employment, for their futures, and all that. And there's just a wide variety of reactions.
So are we finding, do you think, because if we've got folks who are saying, listen, I'm willing to sacrifice my time at work or my income for more freedom. So whether that's freedom to spend with your family or freedom to, do more leisure activities or spend more time on your health and wellness plan, there's got to be a trade-off because, if we've been used to working this sort of 40 plus hours a week, obviously that we're services our time for money, right? So
Mhm.
if we're going to change that dynamic between the services that we're willing to give for time and money, what does that mean for our overall wealth picture? Because clearly we need to be able to take whatever percentages of our income we can and put that away to savings for the future. So is that creating new conversations with some of the advisors that you're connecting with?
Well, here's the interesting thing is the Smith maneuver, the personal finance strategy that I educate and train on, does not require any additional cash flow to start improving your financial situation. So what it does, there's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. The rich work for their money, and the wealthy's money works for them.
Mhm.
And that for me is the goal of a lot of people. If I have freedom financially, if my money is working for me, I'm wealthy and I can afford to spend time doing what I like, spend time with my family, etc. The people who are coming to us looking for solutions on the personal finance front, uh, they quickly learn that they can achieve that personal time freedom much quicker without having to outlay any additional cash flow. It's the only financial strategy out there that does this.
Right.
So it's when you start explaining this to someone, a homeowner, and a light bulb goes off, that's a really, really satisfying moment where you see
Sure.
they understand what the strategy is all about, what it can do for them in terms of not only improving their wealth, but getting them out of that 9 to 5, 40 hours
Right.
a week or
Right.
50 hours a week at the office
Right.
much quicker. So there isn't a sacrifice of how much effort do I put in at work? How much time do I have with my family? You can increase your wealth right away.
Right.
Start that doing
Right.
it right away without having to sacrifice, without having to put more time in at the office to earn more money.
Oh, that's a really good point because Moira, I'm going to, circle back to yourself because we're all looking for a quick fix, especially in the health and wellness space, right? Like how quickly can I lose money? How quickly can I build money, muscle mass? How quickly can I go from feeling really crummy to feeling really great? So there's a commitment, there's a new relationship, I think, between time, money, and freedom. So are you, speaking to the folks that you're talking about at the gym, you can't get into the parking lot in January, and by February and March and perhaps other times of the year, you take your pick. Are you finding that the folks that you speak to on the treadmill? I mean, I always found that if I ever went to the gym, you get on the treadmill, start some great conversations with people. Are you finding that there's sort of a new resurgence to the relationship between time and project or time and results?
Yes, but if it's all right with you, I'd like to continue with what's going on already here, because what I'm hearing with Robinson and with Sharon and Precious, and first of all, Sharon mentioned the quiet quitting. And I thought, what a beautiful way. It's not just the great resignation, it's the quiet quitting. And Robinson, I'm a former certified financial planner. I was in financial services for 20 years. So I'm listening to this conversation, and Precious, you're talking about the difference in having to go back into the workplace and how, if I guess for some people who are extroverts, they've craved the connection so much that they're delighted to be around physical bodies, whereas others are just saying, oh, now I got to give up a lot of my normal routine to be able to fit in here again. So there's all that going on. And what I'm seeing, because I mean, Sharon, you said how people want human connection on their terms. That is so true. And, I will never work for someone else ever again.
Either me.
I think all the heads are nodding. We're all saying, yeah.
We'll all agree that more and more people who are quietly quitting aren't necessarily just sitting home on their hands.
Right.
They're looking for ways to reinvent themselves.
Yes.
Now, that also creates a financial challenge because you don't land running. You have to fail forward. You have to experiment and try, or maybe even get new skills and train up. So there's all that stress around finances and around lifestyle choices. And now I will bring in again the thing about self-care. because this is where self-care, starting with self-awareness, understanding where you are burning out, when and where you feel overwhelmed, and what do I need to do to shift my inner and outer geography, my environment, in order to bring myself up and out of that and get back on track. Because if it's to be, it's up to me, right?
Yes, for sure.
Does that kind of answer your question a little bit, Trish?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think, to Sharon's point, I loved how you brought in not only your granddaughter at 7 years of age, but your adult children at 28 and 30. And you're going, there's a bit of a connection there between, it's not a generation gap, it's an attitude shift.
Yes.
And I think that's really important because we've all been sort of moving along in our lane with our thoughts and beliefs, and I really think that especially in the last year that's sort of all changing, and the dynamics even of relationships are changing, which I think is really important.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, thank you. So because my husband's a chiropractor, and so he has a clinic in Peterborough, brick and mortar, right?
Yeah.
And so during COVID, at the very beginning of it, he was off work for 2 weeks with the big lockdown and everything. But after that, he's just been going in and out of his clinic every day ever since. Whereas I've always, for the last couple of decades, worked from home, and I love working from home. So we have that hybrid between the two of us a little bit. There's so many ways of coming at this now. As people are at a certain age, we don't get what we want. We get our standards, and people are looking at, okay, what are my priorities? What are my boundaries? What will I or won't I? What am I willing to give up in order to be who I am authentically? Yeah,
that's very true. Now, Precious, equity and fairness is also a really hot topic because we're looking at those two things and really relating them to the workplace. We're relating them to personal relationships. We're relating them to how we show up. So are you finding that folks are becoming more strategic in reevaluating their lifestyle choices based on this new sense of normal? I mean, you're in a wonderful position where you've taken a hybrid model and now you're back in a sort of office environment. So what are
Yeah.
your take on the sort of attitude shift that we're seeing?
Yes, I want to say this too. When we speak about the options that we have being hybrid, being home, not everyone has that option. I'm going to speak on two environments that don't have the option as easily and that survived the pandemic, and their numbers didn't go down. One is funeral homes, their numbers have gone up. And then you talk about early childhood. There are spaces that everyone doesn't have the option to just stay home and be effective.
Right.
So when we speak to it, it can be a bit from a privileged standpoint that people have the option. Everyone does not have the option, nor do we want them to. It's kind of like this. Um, you can do without a lot of things, but not without your trash man coming by every so often and taking that trash out. So when we talk, sometimes it's um it's exclusionary from those who their positions don't involve just staying home. So
Right.
since that's the case, and there are environments with brick and mortar, how are those people treated? Because we don't want them to leave. If they pack up, we're gonna be up a creek because
Yeah,
we don't
that's
even know how
true.
to operate the copy machine. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah,
So what happens then? How do we treat them? How do we value them in response to ourselves? And I did just contribute to a book, Ennobling Business for Success, and my chapter is Recognize Equality. When you recognize things, you treat people differently because there will always be a need for spaces that are active. What about when you take your car to get service? Can they do that from home? No. So
no,
there are spaces that have to be in place. And as leaders in those spaces, whether you're leading from home or whether you go in, whether you're in on a regular basis, you have to value them in a certain way so that they won't have the quiet quitting on you. Say, you know what? I'm done with this. I want a part of the other. There will be spaces that need to be maintained, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert or somewhere off the charts.
yeah,
We just have to, and keeping that in mind. And so I'm in the space now with the um, early childhood education. There are just spaces that have so much opportunity. And when they had to stay home, their parents were having a fit. They
true.
wanted them back in school. They didn't know what to do with them. And sometimes we can be very judgmental and people say, oh, well, they're your children. Yeah, they're our children, but we all need support.
Yes,
When you're
that's
doing
very
something
true.
constantly and that's not your specialty, you know how to love them, but sometimes have them to be orderly and do complete a goal, complete their work, and then they need social connections of their peers as well. So yeah, I think your question, I might have touched on it in a roundabout way. We need a space for all of us.
Yeah, and
And
it
we
takes a village, right? Isn't that saying it takes a
Yeah.
village? And I think that we've all sort of touched on various different areas where regardless of what the new definition of work is, I think the flexibility that those who have the flexibility are taking advantage of it.
Yes.
And those who don't have the flexibility as leaders, we have to show up differently. To your point, Precious, right? We really do have to look at a whole new way of communicating, really, and keeping all of our teams as teams because they'll get too fractional otherwise, and we won't really have a chance to be in inclusion. And freedom of choice is not just about your way or the highway. It's all about making sure that everybody within your team feels that they have freedom of choice, right?
And that's Trish. That's exactly right. And technology is going to play such an important role
Yes.
in
Yes.
keeping people together, whether they're working remotely, in the office, a hybrid model. There's a lot of technology out there. One company I've come across is called Inqli, INQLI, and they're doing fantastic things with keeping employees connected, mentorship, virtual volunteering to keep people connected, to keep them with a sense of inclusion. And so technology is going to play a very, very important part in making sure that we all continue to function somewhat efficiently and effectively and communicate. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the near future holds with regards to that.
For sure.
I just want to jump on that and go back to what Precious said, because you're right. Technology, as Precious was talking about the car repairman, for example. In my head, I'm thinking, give this another 2 or 3 years, that guy's going to be coming to my house to fix my car. I'm not going to his house.
Right.
because the mindset of us, we're so fixed. And with AI and the metaverse, we are definitely being more virtual, whether we like it or not. I look at how my habits of getting food is so different now. DoorDash, Uber Eats. I mean, I don't go. I just got heard from Amazon. I guess I spent so much money on Amazon that they gave me this whatever. And I'm thinking, gosh, I'm a person who never shopped online.
Online. Yeah.
Never. I'm like, I need to be in the store. I need to try on the stuff myself. I buy literally everything online.
Online. Mhm.
Everything. I mean, from the simplest pin to the most complex things. This is just how this is where we're going, and how technology now, it's same day delivery. Now it's 2 hour delivery. Technology is speeding up, the world's changing. And yes, maybe funeral homes and stuff may be one of those that stays there. But from what I'm seeing and where we're going, it's gonna be coming to you.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
that's very true. I think that we have a new definition, right? We have a new definition for our individual wealth and well-being, what works for us and what doesn't work for us. And I think we all need to have the opportunities to make the freedom of those choices for sure. And I really love the fact that, it doesn't really matter where we are in our careers or where we live in terms of geography. We all seem to be going through the same sorts of challenges. And I think that's really important.
yes.
To wrap up our conversation, what I would like to do is ask each of you to share a little tidbit of advice for our viewing and listening audience so that we can kind of leave today's discussion thinking that we do have an inclusive opportunity to make choices, and that it's okay to to be maybe making a left and right turn at this particular stage in our careers as we move forward for the rest of the year. So Moira, because we started with your first question, what would be a little bit of advice that you would give to folks who've listened to our chat today?
Well, a couple of things, and quickly before I do, I want to say something about what Precious was explaining, and because Sharon responded beautifully, but then I thought of something different as well. Precious, when you're talking about essential workers, the people whose jobs cannot be eliminated, healthcare, for example, or even to a
Yes.
certain extent the hospitality, the infrastructure that we all rely on, the guys that fix the traffic lights, all of that, right? And we look at the exodus that has been occurring for
Mhm.
for laborers in different areas. And it's like, what do we need to learn from that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Where can we grow? Where can we address this going forward, even as we do shift more and more into AI?
Mhm.
Right.
So, because healthcare in particular, I mean, I look at the doctors that have retired, because they just were so stressed.
Mhm.
Right.
So, and that's because of COVID. So, all right. So, Trish, you're asking me what are some key
What would be, yeah,
suggestions?
what would be a word of advice or something that you would leave with our viewing and listening audience pertaining to this whole idea about freedom around wealth and well-being?
Trust that you are creative, resourceful, and whole. Trust that you have it within you, and that all you need to do is reach out and find your tribe, find the people who want what you want,
Right.
and learn from them, lock arms with them, develop a system for daily taking action on your goals. And I like the Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. It's that you know always do your best, be impeccable with your word. Uh, don't make assumptions and don't take it personally. And then if you need to reinvent yourself, trust that you have what it takes to make it happen. And that
That's a really
includes physical,
wonderful.
financial, emotional,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Precious, what would your sort of takeaway or leaving with our viewing and listening audience in terms of a little tidbit of information?
Yes, my word will be balance.
Oh, I
Balance
love
all
that.
things. And when we swing too far to one side, then you have a tendency to swing even harder when you get opportunity to the other. What if health and safety is somewhere in the middle? And I think when we are too polarized, there's a whole segment we miss.
Mhm.
And there will always be uh, people that we can learn from, grow from. And they are not, everyone is not just alike. Just like you mentioned with the essential workers, there are some things that we can do that we have to decide maybe I shouldn't do. So much has happened with technology. Our children have such an access that if we have to rethink that, we might have said, maybe let's do this a little differently. But everything you can do doesn't mean you should run full force ahead and do. So I would say balance, pull back, and you can never get away from human connections. When you do, when you're too far extreme, you're sacrificing something.
Yeah, that's
You are
very true.
sacrificing part of this humanness that we share. Everyone cannot just be from home, nor should they. And those who are not, we have to recognize they exist and treat them accordingly. And not everyone has the option. And we're grateful that they don't. So my point is balance in all things.
Yeah,
Balance in all things.
that's wonderful. And Robinson?
Well, I think a large subject of this discussion here today has been on freedom. And in relation to that, ironically, my one word would be work, because it takes work to achieve freedom, whether you're working towards personal freedom with regards to finances, or freedom with regards to your mental health, spiritual health, whatever the case may be, it takes work. It doesn't just arrive on your doorstep like
That's
a
true.
winning lottery ticket. So, you have to work towards the freedom you want.
That's really great advice. And Sharon?
I would say technology. Don't be left behind. I saw what happened in 2020, how many companies closed that didn't need to be closed, but they just could not adapt to the new environment because it was a lack of technology. And
Right.
so I would also want to add personal development. I think it was Mara who said, when we're being self-aware and we're trying to reinvent ourselves, look to see where your gaps are and work on you. Be self-aware. Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay.
technology, don't get left behind.
Yeah, that's a really wonderful piece of advice for sure, especially as we're all on this virtual platform today, having a wonderful conversation from various parts of North America. So
Yes.
I'd like to thank each and every one of you for spending some time with me today. We've really launched a wonderful opportunity for us to have business conversations, obtain different points of view, and maybe even a few different personal takeaways as a result of some of the things that we've shared today. So thank you very much to each and every one of you for joining me today and discussing the whole idea about wealth and well-being and the subtopic of freedom. So thank you.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you for this opportunity.
So I'd also like to mention that if one of our panel guests, you have piqued your interest at all and you'd like to reach out to them, there will be links to their business stories in the description portion of either the podcast or the video, so that you can directly make some connections with them, with links to their website, so that you can connect with them through their contact pages. So thank you so much for joining us for today. And I'd also like to mention that if you would like to share your business story in our platform, please feel free to visit shareyourstories.online and join this growing community of entrepreneurs and enterprise leaders. And if you have a topic that you'd like us to discuss, feel free to send along a message through the contact page on our website, and we'll be happy to consider that in the months that move forward. So I'm Trish Tonai, founder and host of the series, and I'd like to again invite you to join us with your business story by visiting our website, shareyourstories.online. And in the meantime, thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to meeting you next time on another edition of Keeping It Real. Thank you so much.